home and community-based settings, which are provider-owned or controlled settings. So we go through and review the setting for different requirements, and depending on whether they meet those really kind of depends on whether they can proceed with that location, which is kind of where we've run into some questions with some of the things associated with the voucher.
Yeah.
And kind of some protections that we could maybe encourage people to be putting into their leases, and then questions about whether some things are permitted or not with the voucher.
Before we get started, can we have everybody just introduce themselves so that Mark knows who he's talking to here? So,
well, Mark, I'm Jake Ruder. I'm here for the next 3 days.
Yeah.
Program administrator for the transition and diversion program. And then we've got 2 of our staff on as well. Sarah, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Sarah. I'm the quality service specialist with the transition and diversion program.
Hi, Sarah.
Okay.
And I'm Kate Rock. I'm the referral specialist for the transition and diversion program.
Okay.
Brianna, you want to go next?
Yep. Hi, I'm Brianna Skachenko. I'm the DD licensing administrator with the DD section.
and then we've got
Sure. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Kylie and Molly are on from my staff here.
Kylie Erickson, Money Falls Person Housing.
Molly Anderson, Money Falls Person Housing, and I'm in Fargo, the Fargo area.
Was that everybody?
Yeah, Gail and Kayla yet, I think.
Sure. Gail Coleman, I'm the Data Quality Program Analyst with MFP.
And I'm Kayla Trespass. I'm the Money Falls, the Person Program Administrator.
Awesome. Perfect. Well,
Just so
nice
you
to
guys
know.
know, Mark has been with us since there was Jake and myself, basically. So
Wow.
Mark was our first contact when I was working on this. Is we went over and met him. So he's been with us since about 2011.
Right. So my name is Mark Austin, and I'm the occupancy director with the Minot Housing Authority. As a disclaimer, Cheryl had sent me just a paragraph of what we wanted to talk about, and she mentioned something about an expert. I don't know that guy, but I'll do my best here today. So we're just going to jump in with the voucher and start chatting about that. If you have a question, just interrupt. I always say I like good information out on the street rather than incorrect information. That it makes everybody's lives a lot easier. Vouchers are issued through the Public Housing Authority. We have several public housing authorities throughout North Dakota, Minot being one of them. And so an individual applies through an application process for the voucher. They go on the waiting list. As their name comes up on the waiting list, we take them through eligibility process. And that's primarily dealing with income and background information. And if that comes back okay, then the next step is to bring them in for an orientation. We call that the Section 8 briefing. Then at that meeting, they are issued a voucher. There is an issuance date on that voucher, an effective date, and that voucher is good for 60 days. So that means the individual that is in receipt of that voucher has 60 days to lease it out. Now, a public housing authority has a right to grant extensions on that. And what we have in our administrative plan is that we will grant 2 30-day extensions, so a total of 120 days. However, there's a contingency on that. If the market conditions are good, there has to be a reason that we grant that extension. For example, during the height of the flood and the oil, where the market conditions were non-existent, we are granting a lot of extensions. Right now, individuals, if they're doing their legwork, they're finding units. Therefore, we're not granting any extensions at this time. And so they go into the private sector, and what we're looking at there is that they're giving, we, based on their family composition, is what we are determining their bedroom size. Okay, so a single parent and a child, we would grant them a 2-bedroom. Now, each housing authority has an independent administrative plan that they can put in that administrative plan that a single parent and a child would only get a 1-bedroom. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Each housing authority has an administrative plan that governs them, tells us what we're going to do. Okay, everybody good so far? Okay, then
Mark, before you go on, and Brianne and Katrina, you guys face a lot of situations where you're looking at 2 unrelated people moving in together, right? I mean, that's the thing that they face most often, and they don't always get to move in at the same time.
okay.
Is that fair to say, you two?
Correct. Yep.
And
So-
maybe one of them qualified for the voucher, the other one isn't on it either yet. So that's the other thing they face a lot of, Mark.
Right. So in the beginning, then that individual just being based on solely one member family, then the housing authority would look at that and they would issue them a 1-bedroom. And then if we're going to change the family composition, here I could see an obstacle of, because they're in a lease, that initial lease is going to be for a 1-year period. And then, you know, I don't like telling an individual, go talk to your landlord to see if they'll let you out of that lease, because, you know, it does cost money to refurbish a unit, for example. Also, we have a payment contract that the landlord signed with the housing authority. Also, the landlord signed a lease with the tenant. So I could see where that might be an obstacle at times. And is there a easy solution to that? No, there is not. But the door is not closed. You know, it all depends on if the individual would be willing to stay within that property management company. Ask, you know, this is the circumstances are changing. If we stay within your company, can we rent a 2-bedroom? One thing I will say is, before adding that individual to any household, always get approval prior to, from both the public housing authority as well as the landlord. No surprises, that's what I say, because that can complicate things down the road.
Mark, one of the things I know that in relation to that sometimes they'll have someone moving that could move in now, but they know that this other person is going to move in in a month or 2. How would you suggest that they manage that? Because I know that you guys face that all the time. You know, someone's ready to move, but the other one's not yet. There maybe a developmental disabilities provider isn't quite available for the other person. So that's the kind of juggling they do all the time.
Okay, communication is always key.
Key.
And I would communicate that right up front with the housing authority. as well as the landlord. But it might not even be to where, upfront, the housing authority, could make a decision based on the length of time through some type of a documentation letter from, I'm gonna say the DD staff, and then the public housing authority then would have documentation of why they did what they did, if that makes sense. And that's very workable. I know periodically, I'll use this for an example, the reunification of children into a household. And if we can get a letter from, like CPS, that this is the goal of what, this family is trying to obtain, then we will provide additional bedrooms based on that information. And I would just use that same theory or logicness to do the same.
So Mark, you'd
Go
want
ahead.
this like at the very start when person A is moving in, person B is a month behind them. So
Yeah.
can they get the 2-bedroom at that point with one being head of household, or how would you look at that?
I would want to be made aware of that right away in the eligibility process when that person is coming in for the very first time. That way that triggers, additional documentation that's needed. Then we're not waiting until the individual has a voucher and then we have to wait for that additional documentation. I would be upfront right away with it, that there is a possibility that this is going to happen. And then what we would do, we would ask for that documentation that would then become part of the file. And that way we have a foundation to stand on if HUD would come in and they have audited a file where we've had an individual, a single person in that was overhoused. And that's the first thing they look at is, do we have documentation in that file? So that's what how I would handle that right away when that first person is coming in. There's the possibility of adding to this household, and then we take care of it before all of the that HAP contract, that lease gets signed, and then we're looking for that applicable size unit right away.
I have another question for you. So would you handle it as head of household, or would you look at it as each individual getting a voucher so that
No.
if person A moves out, B isn't stuck without a voucher?
Unfortunately, that person A is going to fill out that application, and they're put into the system, and that person is going to remain the head of household. The secondary party that's coming later, unfortunately, no, they don't have a voucher. They can apply while they're living there, for a voucher, and then, move out. And then the person that's in the 2-bedroom would have options of, number one, if they could afford to pay, the rent in that unit, and then we just downsize it to a 1-bedroom. Does that make sense to everyone?
If they apply for a voucher and get it while they're living with the other person, are they required then to move out into their own unit?
Not, no, I don't know if I'm following you. So the head of household is issued the voucher.
Right,
Okay, that would be the first person in contact with the housing authority.
yes.
So,
And then if the second guy moves in
yeah,
and the second guy applies for a voucher and eventually receives it, does that second guy then have to move out into his own apartment?
well, yeah, because they're
Okay,
dually assisted.
okay.
He would have to find his own unit, yeah. Yeah.
Do all excuse me, do all housing authorities follow this, or does each have their own kind of distinct rules, or is this a across the board thing?
You know, I wouldn't state that black and white, that each housing authority covers, you know, exactly the way I explained. You know, because each housing authority, again, has their own administrative plan. And that those are our policies, our procedures of how we conduct business. But it's an easy question and it's an easy answer. You know, the answer is in the effort of asking. So that's how I would handle that. Okay. So,
Katrina, do you have a question or?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So with that orientation, just to step back for a second, does the person that is going to be residing there have to be a part of that orientation? If the person has a guardian, is that guardian expected to do it? How does that work?
well, we always like to see the individual that's being issued the voucher there at the meeting. You know, if there's a situation where there is a guardian, extenuating circumstances, right? With that, somebody is, limited mobility or something, you know, we'll definitely take things into consideration.
Okay. And then
Katrina, I'm sure you see some individuals that are pretty disabled and probably couldn't interact at all or communicate with you, Mark, related to
Sure.
their voucher. I mean, just because of the nature of their intellectual disability. But go ahead, Katrina.
yeah. So and another question that I kind of have, I know, so the voucher would be in the person that will be living there's name, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so sometimes I know when people are going to sign, say, a lease, and they have a guardian that is in charge of making those decisions, does that impact kind of who needs to be involved with that voucher at all, or how does that work?
Well, there's going to be an individual that, who's going to be in receipt of that public assistance, okay? And that is not going to be the guardian. The individual might be, you know, limited faculties, for example. Their name is still going to be listed as the individual who is in receipt of that assistance. Okay, but we may have documentation that's asked for if they are legal guardian. We ask for, so we can have that guardian come in and sign paperwork on behalf of that individual. But that name, it's not going to be ever going to be the guardian. It's going to be the actual individual who is in receipt of assistance.
So is it safe to assume that you get a copy of the lease?
We require a copy of the lease.
Okay. And then if the person has a guardian, is it required, and that guardian has that legal authority, I guess, over that person, is it then required that that guardian be signed onto that lease?
Actually, we wouldn't ask them to be signing onto that lease. We would ask for like a POA, you know, if that's in fact the case. And then so we'd have that documentation in that file, and that would be like a rider underneath the lease.
Okay.
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 And
Thank you.
Mark, a lot of times the guardian has the authority to make those financial decisions,
Yep.
Mark, and they're likely to be the rep payee for their disability benefits
Yep.
as well. So
Yep.
they may not be a POA. Technically,
Right.
they might be
Right.
just the guardian.
And
But they,
I'm familiar with both.
yes,
Looked at both. And one is just as good as the other, right?
yeah.
So, yeah. What we want to do is we want to make sure that, the housing authority is covered, that the landlord's covered, as well as the tenant, it's like it's like a pyramid. And, we want to make sure that all three of these dots connect. And, if there is a question, that everything is sound, and we can back everything up of why we did what we did.
And then to go back to the part about the individual being at the meetings. We've worked with quite a few housing authorities, and I know Mark has been really good with us. If the person isn't able to travel, we might have that person from Money Falls, a person go there and do a Zoom meeting
Yeah,
so that the person isn't required to travel into Minot if they're Velbin Nursing Home, for instance, or something like that. And so just asking for that reasonable accommodation and having that communication that this would be a hardship for the person to travel in.
right. Absolutely. And, it's something that, it gets bounced off me quite often. And, we want to accommodate and, make this transition as successful as we possibly can, because they're our consumers, they're why we're here. So that's our job. That's why we get up in the morning. So any other questions about the voucher, the term 60 days? We have the right of granting the 2 30-day extensions. I'm going to tie that into, I'll go and talk about payment standards in a little bit. I'm going to talk about portability right now. So portability is, way back in the day, Cheryl was talking about, when her and I first met. Prior to that, the state was actually had part in administering this program, but they were called certificates at the time. So then, the Minot Housing Authority, when I started, they had public housing, and then they had vouchers. I was trying to remember, and, right around 60 vouchers that the housing authority had. But the state was administering right around 400 of these certificates. And these certificates, you were capped at what the FMR was, the fair market rent. And they were good in the state that they were issued in, could not cross state lines. So then HUD looked at them and said, well, we don't know if those certificates are, if we're using the right vehicle to administering these certificates. So they removed them from the state, put them in the hands of the local public housing authorities, and then they created this program called the Certificate Voucher Program. And so it was maybe you've heard of the HAP program, HAP, and that's when it was administered by the state. And then when they merged the two, then it became the Section 8 Certificate Voucher Program. And then just with changes, they converted all of those certificates to vouchers and created the Housing Choice Voucher Program. More information than you probably ever want to know, but now you have a history. So the Housing Choice Voucher Program, a voucher can cross state lines, which means it can go to another jurisdiction. Now, when an individual applies for assistance, if they were a resident at the time that they applied for assistance, once they're issued the voucher, they can utilize portability right away. If they were not a resident they need to establish a residency before they can take our voucher and transfer it to another jurisdiction. So with the Housing Choice Voucher Program, you are allowed to move once a year, okay? So once an individual starts their housing assistance, that means that they're here for that 1 year period. Okay, so if they're going to utilize, if they were a resident, and again, that's a key term there, they were a resident at the time of application. If they're going to transfer that voucher out of our jurisdiction, they have to do it at that time. There are other housing authorities throughout the United States that currently do not have an open waiting list. They've closed the waiting list just due to the amount of people that are currently on it. And we've dealt with people from other parts of the United States that come and try to expedite that process to get that voucher in their hands so they can take it home with them. There is one housing authority in the state of North Dakota that had an individual fly in from Atlanta to do the initial appointment and then flew back to Minot for the orientation Section 8 briefing. So that's why HUD kind of imposed these policies, these procedures to eliminate that. The problem being is if at one time Minneapolis, their FMR was 3 times as high as what Minot was paying. Therefore, so if an individual moved their voucher to Minneapolis, Minneapolis has the right to say, we're not going to absorb this voucher. We are going to bill your housing authority. It's like taking 3 vouchers right out of our budget authority. Therefore, that's the best they can do. You have to have residency or live in the jurisdiction for 1 year. Okay. Go ahead.
Some of those people fake it, don't they, Mark? I mean, we've
Oh.
seen that. They just do what you described, and they will
Yep.
basically steal our vouchers
Yep.
through manipulation, and it's just sad. And it's
Yep.
sad that HUD doesn't do anything about it. I mean, they do what they can, but they're well aware that people do this and do nothing about it.
Right. And that, if they're going to help the people in their jurisdiction first, if they
Yes.
have a waiting list, and then they're just going to keep billing that other PHA.
Yep.
And then there is no timelines that are implemented, so it could be a very long time.
Yep.
So
I mean, they could at least do that, Mark. Make them absorb those vouchers
Yeah.
if they get moved to the new jurisdiction.
Yeah, you're spot on, Jake. Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, any other questions in regards to portability?
And I think for our DD providers, typically they're people moving from one part of the state to another. It's, they might get approved in the Bismarck area, but now they can't get a provider, so now they're moving to Fargo, or
Right.
they're that kind of thing. You guys see that periodically, right, Brianna?
Yep, that's correct. Moving from one area of the state to the next,
Yeah.
another, yep.
So one of the things that we have is a gentleman's agreement here in North Dakota is that if what you just described, if an individual needs additional services that's better suited in Fargo, we call Fargo, are you billing, are you absorbing? And Fargo will say, we're gonna absorb. And if Fargo were to call us, sometimes we trade, you know, that happens, and we'll just trade one port for the other. So there's that gentleman's agreement that we just absorbed. Some of the smaller, the PHAs, I know at one time, like with Roulette, they wouldn't want us to absorb because that way they could use their allocation of funding. But, you know, that's discussed between the PHAs. So the relationship that we have with the rest of the housing authorities, that it's going to be a pretty smooth transition when that happens. Yeah. Payment standards. So how those payment standards work is usually about August, HUD will send out what is called FMRs. And what PHAs do is there's a comment period where we can take a look at those, take a look at our market conditions. Are those FMRs mirroring the market? Are we too high, too low? One of the things that a public housing authority does not want to do is set the market with their FMRs or their payment standards. HUD has established the FMRs. If you use them at what HUD establishes, it is what it is. But a housing authority has a right to decrease those FMRs by down to 90%, or we can increase it up to 110% with our board approval. Okay. Now, and we've been pretty fortunate with that, we've been able to reflect the market. Again, we don't want to set it, we want to follow it. And so right now, I believe that I have those set for Minot at 110%. And again, here, just like the administrative plan, a PHA, we're not all going to have them set at the same. Some are going to be, I don't foresee lower, but you know, anywhere between that 100 and 110% that a housing authority is going to set that, yeah, that payment standard. So then, yeah, with board approval, normally January 1, I try to get ours implemented, and those will take effect for the new people coming on. And then for the current individuals that are on the program, if there is an increase or a decrease, we will take care of that change at their second annual recertification. So it's not implemented that particular year, it's always the second. So it's usually a game of catch up all the time with setting those individuals that are currently on the program to where the payment standards are. And that way they're not paying more than 30% of their income. If that's making sense. I hope I just didn't open a can of worms there. That can get confusing even for us in the office here. But yeah, the housing authority, the PHA does have that right with payment standards. Were there any specific questions in regards to payment standards?
I think one of the questions that was asked previously was, do they go by the payment standard of the issuing housing authority or the receiving housing authority when it's ported?
It'll be the housing authority that the new jurisdiction where they're going. And that's one of the things that we look at, Cheryl, when an individual is porting, where was that? Oh, it's just not coming to me. Last week, my memory is good. It's just not very long. But the payment standard was like $38 different, so higher payment standard. So they're using that payment standard at that housing authority that's going to be where the individual's living. Okay, the second, this will be the fourth thing, subleasing units. I'm going to see what the questions are in regards to subleasing before I comment.
Jake, do you remember what the question was on the email?
Let's see. I don't exactly, but I know that you guys were thinking about someone was living in an apartment, had a voucher, and then they wanted someone else to move in and do a sublease in
So
order
I
to
can
go ahead.
take
Brian.
this one as an example. So what we're having some or new providers want to do is like take over a house or an apartment or something and have their name on the lease and then turn around and like rent it for a cheaper amount to individuals, and then have them try to get housing because the rent might be, for an example, we have a provider who purchased or is renting a house from a property management company, but the rent, the house itself comes to like $2,500 per month. But they have 3 people living in the home. So 3 people own one home, 4 people in another home. Well, 3 people or 4 people at $2,500 per month is pretty costly. So what they wanted to do is the provider would lease the home from the property management company, and then they would turn around and lease it to the individuals at a cheaper amount so that they could try to offset that cost at a lower amount and then have them try to get housing. So kind of like they were calling it sublease because they were leasing it from the property management company and then they were turning around and having a lease with the clients.
So I have a question. When you say provider, who's the provider? Just
like our DD service provider.
okay. Yeah. So the DD service provider, they rent a house from the landlord, and then they're going to have their own lease for these individuals.
Correct.
Okay. And they're not going to be the actual owner of the property. That is a really tough question to answer because the way that I look at that is number one, who do I take? Who does the landlord, take to court if there's something that goes south there? And then the judge looks at it. Well, who's the owner? And there's 2 different leases here. I think that's really, it's pretty gray. One of the things I'll just subleasing, like for us anyways, with our property, we do not allow it. We do not allow any subleasing. When we were having earlier in the conversation, I'm just going to use you as an example, Jake, because you're there and I don't know you well, but I do know you. And so Jake rents a unit. He's the first one to move into this unit. And Jake is the head of household. And then Mark, he's possibly going to be moving into this unit in 2 months, okay? And Jake decides that he's gonna go off housing, and this is all hypothetical. He's gonna go off housing, he doesn't need the voucher anymore. He's surrendering the voucher, so he's gonna be leaving that unit. So in that case, what the PHA can do is issue Mark the voucher. Then Mark becomes the head of household. And then another person comes 2 months later and is added to that household. So that then becomes Mark's voucher. Jake has surrendered it. Okay. I was just reading what's on the screen there. So yeah, I really don't have a solid answer for that subleasing as far as I'd be leery. I definitely would be leery of that.
Do you think the other housing authorities would look at it different than what you guys look at it, or should they look at the situation with each housing authority where the provider is located?
I would say so. Yeah,
Okay.
let's see how they feel about it.
Yeah.
In Fargo, they do have shared housing. And so you can have 4 individuals living there, and each one has a voucher for their bedroom and the common space. But I
Yeah,
haven't seen it anyplace else besides Fargo. I don't think that we've come across that.
and
And
that,
if the 4th person moves out, the landlord is out of luck because they have to find somebody to rent that 4th bedroom to make their money.
right. And that we had looked at a parcel of property for those SROs, I think is what they call them.
Single resident, yeah.
And you know, I've not dealt with them, so I don't have the knowledge to share. And maybe there is other stipulations that kind of govern that. You know, like when you're saying to decrease the rent so it becomes more affordable from the 2,500, then how does Dee Dee just absorb the cost of making up the money between the 2,500 and what the affordable price is for the individuals? That's a question. I don't know.
The provider
Yeah.
would be responsible for it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. You know,
Oh, no, that's fine.
It's an interesting concept though, because you're
Yeah.
right. Well, first making sure that we have enough staff to serve those higher need folks. It's helpful to have them living together if they're willing.
Yeah.
It's not always a good thing, but for those folks that can live together, if they could get a rent amount that would fit under the payment standard, that would be interesting, a way to approach it, because you're right, those houses are expensive. They end up being little group homes like settings, and they have staff basically around the clock, to support those folks. But they can't afford it without a voucher typically.
Right.
Molly's got something similar going on right now. That's why I asked Molly to jump on here.
Yeah.
She's got 4 individuals moving from Ann Carlson and extremely high needs. And to find 4 bedrooms on a main floor that's affordable, and then having the owner be willing to do the modifications of having the track put in and having roll-in showers that are large enough and things like that. It's really difficult. And the voucher, the payment standard for us to be able to have 4 people live in that same place. I think that she found one, and it was, I think, Molly, did you say $4,000 for that
Ooh.
home?
I think she's gone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think she found one that had 4 bedrooms on the main floor. And each individual had at least 14 pieces of equipment. And so it was that they'd also need additional rooms for the equipment and things like that. And so that's a really difficult one that that Molly's working on right now that we're trying to figure out.
Mark,
Yeah.
I know Great Plains has done a bunch of those SROs in Jamestown because of just some of the issues with housing and folks coming out of the state hospital there. So
Yep.
he might be able to, shed some light on those SRO situations too.
Right. Yeah, I just, when we looked at it, it just didn't fit.
Mhm.
And the need wasn't there, and we'd made some changes to, um, uh, we had a preference that was on our housing choice voucher program that a single person would have to wait if there was um, more than 2 people that applied on the housing choice voucher program. It would actually push that single person back. And that's what, initially we were looking at to see how we could best suit that. Well, what we did is we just took that preference away from that, and it seems to have been pretty effective, and it's met our needs. So,
Brand, do you guys have a location in North Dakota that are trying this? Is it in Fargo or Bismarck or?
Yep, there's actually 2 locations in Fargo.
Okay. What kind of conversations have you had with the Fargo Housing Authority around this?
So we have stayed out of it, like Katrina and myself have stayed out of it, and the regional office have been involved in it. So we're just trying to learn a little bit more about
Okay.
this because we do the HCBS setting reviews, and then we're just wondering, is this something that we need to maybe add in there to kind of educate our providers on this, that either you can do this or you can't do this, or you need to check to see with housing first if you're into your clients will be able to get housing if you do this, or
That makes sense.
yeah, and I would definitely ask them, if that housing authority would be willing to give you some time and just kind of roadmap everything out for you. Just so you had a lucid understanding going in prior to. And that there are some other things that I know that the Fargo Housing Authority has done that just due to their size that and availability, because they're a metro, they're able to apply for additional things, whereas, we finally became a micro. We're not even a metro in Minot, but they call us a micro, which opened some doors for us. And just different elements crop up and create conversation. And yeah, we just keep trying. So I wish you luck with that one. And I don't mean that sarcastically. It's just gonna be a lot of footwork to make all of the pieces of that puzzle fit together. I hope it works.
and Katrina and I were like, I don't want to speak for you, Katrina, but I know nothing about housing, like never really had to get involved in that. And we're just getting asked more and more questions on it, being brought more and more into it. And we have a ton of new providers who are becoming licensed. And I don't know that these are things they're even thinking about or even really know what housing is. So it's like maybe the more information we can provide them up front too, maybe will help the regions out as well.
Right. Yep, I agree with you fully. And there's different things available all the time too, that, and, new administration does things different, cuts, some bring on, and, you know, it just, yeah, just an open mind all the time and see what's available, how we can best help.
I'm going to throw this out there. This isn't very popular, but I'm going to throw it out there. One of the things that we are seeing probably more often than not right now are providers asking that the individuals that we're working with, can they move into this building? Because we're already serving 3 or 4 people in this building. And I know at the DOJ, we can only have a certain amount of individuals in a building. I'm not sure if it's 20 or 25% that are receiving services. But we've got a lot of pushback from some of the providers saying, no, they need to be in this building. And it's almost like creating another smaller institutional setting. The person isn't having a choice on where they'd like to live. The provider seems to be deciding that some of the times. And so that's just something that we've been having happen a little bit more right now.
Well, one of the last things that we want to do as a public housing authority is steer people. You know, that's a big no-no for us, so. And, you know, it's convenient for some, you know, but I agree with you that, you know, all of a sudden there's I'll use the group home setting. And, you know, that's not fair to the individual, in my opinion, if we're not giving them a choice.
I have, excuse me, I have 3 individuals right now. 2 want to be roommates over in Mandan and then 1 in Bismarck. And the DDPM's adamant that I pick the one building because they have staff in there already. And then the one in Mandan, we thought we had lined up, but the rents went over the payment standard. And so I'm thinking, well, there's other options we could move these individuals to, but they're, nope, we'll just wait. Maybe something will change or the rents will come down. So it's frustrating on our end because of that. Like there's other options out there for these individuals that would meet their needs as well. But we get the pushback from the DDPMs.
Have you guys heard that? Brianna and Katrina, have you heard that kind of pushback on your side? You know, I know that they're doing it because of staff issues. I just don't know if you've heard the side that housing staff are bringing to the table around, you know, trying to steer people related to the need for the provider versus what the need of the individual might be.
I haven't heard from a housing aspect. I've heard from obviously a provider aspect about pushing people more towards group settings versus you know, individual apartment settings. And right now we do have some providers who are trying to close their smaller duplexes, smaller settings into larger group settings because of staffing issues.
Moving the wrong direction.
Yep.
Wow. That's sad to hear, guys. That's really sad to hear.
It is. It is.
Other things that Katrina and Brianna, that you guys are thinking about that, I know you may not know the questions, but other situations that you've gotten some questions about from your side, or what might be additionally helpful given, you know, some of the things we've talked about today.
Well, I actually have a question for Cheryl because something that you just said kind of piqued my interest. What are you referencing with the DOJ and that I think it was 25% kind of cap? What is that in relation to?
Well,
Okay, do you want to?
yeah, well, I'll start, Cheryl, and you can kick in for the stuff that I've forgotten. But part of the HUD funding for building new buildings, what they've explained to us is that if we're going to give you this money to build a building for folks that are in need, what they don't want us to do is put more than 25% of the individuals in that building that are getting community-based support services, because then it just simply creates another institutional setting. You know, we've got places, I'm sure, Mark, you could probably talk about that, but I know in Fargo, they actually targeted a specific building that's probably 95% you know, folks with disabilities. And they said it's a lovely institution. People can afford to live there, but you know, all the people in the building have a disability and getting a home and community-based services. We sort of created our own you know, situation like that. People need to live in an affordable place, and they're affordable, and so everybody moves in, and it just ends up being a complex for only people with disabilities, and so they don't get really any exposure to the larger community setting, is what the HUD folks look at, the housing and urban development people. And so that's why they look at that. Now, we don't go out and necessarily count the number of people we get in each building, but we certainly don't want to initiate that on our side so that that occurs. But you know, every time one of these new buildings open up, they're the affordable place to live. And you know, when you're living on SSI and you don't have a voucher, that's where you live. You move into those but the one other thing, Karina, is they're moving away from those large centralized uh, housing developments. I know, Mark, you could probably talk about that. You guys got a couple of them in Minot.
Yeah.
Do you look at so the property owner is? So just as an example, we have a DD provider on the western side of the state who is purchasing lots of property, apartment buildings, stuff like that. Is that something that's looked at with housing and stuff as far as who the property owner is? Or just are you speaking specifically to like HUD funding and stuff? Or
Yeah, so if, let's say, you know, Pride gets HUD funding to build a building, and this have 40 units, and they fill, you know, 35 of them with folks they serve, now that's no longer what they call an integrated setting. You know, they're living in their own apartment, and that's great, but they're only living with other folks with a disability. So that's where they were focusing. Now, you know, we don't go out and count them. The building isn't held accountable. It would come into play for us as a provider saying, you know, is this an integrated setting? So you know, you're looking at the settings rule. It's worth thinking about when it comes to, is this a community setting? They have their own apartment. They're getting in and out. It's just, um, you know, they want to live there. It's great. You know, it's not a bad place to be. It's just sometimes they don't consider um, it integrated at all. And so, yeah, Kayla put in our 3 or 4 person adult family or agency foster care. They don't look at that as integrated at all. They certainly don't look at group homes as integrated. And they don't look at these large apartment complexes with, you know, 100 people and 85 they don't look at that as integrated either. We can't count them as a target population member transition if they move to those residences. It's a legitimate transition. They're living where they want, but it's not a integrated setting according to the Justice Department. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
yeah, it did. It did. Thank you.
Mark, could I ask you to talk about mainstream real quick before we finish up?
MS5s. That's what we call them in-house, MS5s.
Oh, okay.
So the mainstream voucher is for non-elderly disabled folks. And Yeah, like in Minot, we have 59 of those vouchers. And out in Williston, we administer that housing authority as well, and we have 26 out there. And yeah, what we do is individuals come in and apply for the assistance, and then we look at the application, and then we make a notation on that application that they qualify for that Main Street voucher. And yeah, we want to make sure that we're utilizing those. Interesting week last week, I got a email from HUD and said that that we currently have 56 of the 59 leased up, and we're using too much funding. And I had a meeting with them today, and I said, but if this is a special program, you fund us for what we spend. And well, yeah, the answer was yes. It's just how we have to go about getting those additional dollars to compensate the cost. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question or not. Yeah, just qualify for them is just non-elderly with verifiable disability.
Yeah, I just wanted everybody to know that those exist, and it seems like we're able to get vouchers much quicker with the mainstream rather than waiting for a regular housing choice voucher to move up the list. So when you're looking at the individuals on the DD waiver, they would qualify for the mainstream vouchers as long as they're in that age range.
Right. Yeah.
Mark, I think it's fair to say from what you've described is that it's really going to be crucial for whoever is working with the individual to be sure to contact the local housing authority they apply to and provide all the information about the potential move dates and who they want to live with, or the potential, maybe they may not know the name, but who and how the situation might evolve when the person gets approved.
Right. And that, again, that is so spot on. Then there's no surprises. Everything is, just fluent as it's flowing. And that just helps everybody involved, and again, each housing authority is may have there are things from HUD, that in-house, we call it boilerplate, that we can't, regulatory statutory things that we can't waiver from. But then, we do have that administrative plan, the policies and procedures that best fit us in our jurisdiction.
Katrina and Brianne, are you guys more confused or less confused than when we started?
How about both?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Do we need to set up another meeting?
Well, it's really good information, just a lot of information. But I appreciate it.
Yeah, Mark, you did a really nice job of, you made it very straightforward. I think it's just when you're new to the world of housing, it takes some time. It's like learning a new language. Cheryl and I from the beginning said you have to learn how to talk housing. And they use, what we might mean and what they might mean are in the same word is completely different. So and so I think it's about developing relationships with, those housing authorities. And that's why we think our housing facilitators are so crucial in working with you on the transition and diversions, because they're so aware of the rules, but they're also really good at developing and maintaining those relationships with the contacts at the housing authority. And sometimes that's makes all the difference in the world.
Yes.
Mark, the relationship she has with you is made all kinds of things possible just because you trust them, you know them, you understand what can be done, what cannot be done.
Right.
So I mean, it just makes such a big difference.
You know, I think, again, that's the crucial element is just that line of communication. And don't be afraid of the question. You know,
Yeah.
I would be more afraid of the answer. Don't ask the question. You know, I periodically, you know, with Cheryl and myself, I'm definitely a comfort there. If she's got a question, she'll send the email, and you know, that's the way I want it. You know, I'll be honest. This housing industry, it's an industry all in itself.
Yep.
It's not like anything else. And but you know, we're here to help. If you have a question, you can go through Cheryl, my contact information. I'll do what I can, but I might steer you towards that PHA that is going to be administering that voucher. Just, I don't want to talk out of school.
I like these guys so much that I gave them my son.
That's true. You did, Cheryl.
We like Jake.
Yeah, that's right.
He's been there about 8 years or something like that. So
But time's gone fast, hasn't it?
yeah.
I was visiting, we were out in Williston for an MOR, and there's a gal that was doing this management occupancy review. There's another acronym, an MOR. I'll throw a, that'll confuse you even more. But you know, she yeah, he does a good job, and she let us know, and it's just I would clone him if I could.
Yeah.
You should see what our supper conversations are revolve around. My husband is like, quit using the acronyms.
Yeah.
So Katrina and Brianne, do you guys want to just think about this? Because Cheryl's going to send you the link to to what we did today, and so you guys will have that. But if you guys want to process this, and then if you want us to get involved with the decision that, you know, what's going on in Fargo, Cheryl, I mean, it's the kind of thing we could help support across the state with you to at least understand what you're doing. And if there's ways to do that, you know, propose that to other housing authorities, if that's a model. I mean, 3 or 4 people together is reasonable if they want to live together. We know that. And I know that the staffing issue is a huge problem across the state. And I know that that's why they want to do it. And I know that the cost of housing is so expensive to try to get the right environment. It's a really interesting approach. It might be able to live in a really nice place versus one of these smaller apartments. So if you guys want to think about it, maybe Cheryl and you could talk about it, and our team obviously is open to supporting whatever you need to do. Not me, but they are.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Okay.
Yeah, just reach out. We work with Angie at Fargo Housing a
Yeah.
lot. So,
Okay.
Because we're
Appreciate
asking
that.
those right questions is key. Knowing what to ask and who to ask is going to make all the difference in the world for you.
And the last thing we want is for, you know, individuals to get ready to move out of where they currently are into here and then find out, you know, something to blow up where they can't because either they couldn't get housing, thought they could get housing and they can't, or we don't want people to lose housing either and
Right.
stuff like that.
That's it. Any last words, Mark or Cheryl?
I want to say, Jake, thank you for all you've done. And I hope this time of your life is the best.
Oh, Mark, that is so kind. Thank you very much. And right back at you and Cheryl and the whole team. It's just been so good to watch the relationships that were built and are still there, and how much you guys do together to make this all possible for people to live in the community. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, well, we'll let you guys go and we'll be back with you, I'm sure.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.